Puppet, yet another network automation tool that's available to us, but it's really a fan favorite of system admins. It's really distracting. Puppet can be used for network automation, and it's great because it has a killer configuration management feature. However, it does require an agent. You have to install an agent on your device that you want to automate. The problem that we have is that most of our devices have no ability to install an agent. So what can we do? Why are we talking about it? Well, let's dive in. Now, just because Puppet requires an agent, it doesn't mean we can't use it with some of our devices, like woo! This guy right here, very expensive, very exclusive. He is, let me draw on him, a Nexus switch. I'm just going to say he's a Nexus 9000. These are data center class switches, and the reason we can use Puppet with this guy is because we can install an agent, because these guys run Linux and Python on board. It's super cool. We do it by enabling what's called the guest shell, which is Linux, and once you're in Linux, you can install the Puppet agent. Now, what I just said was a half-truth. For the purpose of an exam, and when comparing Ansible, Puppet, and Chef, Ansible is the only one that can do things without an agent. However, Puppet, with recent additions and recent updates, has an agentless option for controlling Cisco devices. So just keep that in mind. You can still do it, just not officially. So for the remainder of our talk, we're going to pretend that's not true, and Nexus OS is the only one we can interact with. Now, before we put strings on our Nexus and make it a Puppet, let's talk more about what Puppet brings to the table and what it's all about. In contrast to, too many spaces. In contrast to Ansible, it's not Python-based, it is Ruby-based. Ruby is another programming language. The good news is you really don't have to know Ruby to get started, but you should learn Ruby if you're going to become very familiar with Puppet. If you want to become a Puppet master, you'll know what I mean in a moment. Learning Ruby won't hurt. Also, when thinking about any particular exam, whereas Ansible was all about the push model, Ansible was super pushy. He's like, take this config, take it. Puppet has a pull model. He's like, you can have it if you want it. What do I mean by that? Well, let's not delay. Let's install this agent on our Nexus device, and I'll show you what I mean. So we get into our guest shell. We install the Puppet agent. He's now officially an agent. I'll call him 007 over here. So now the Nexus device is primed and ready to pretty much become one of our Puppets. To control our Puppet, we'll need a Puppet master. This will be a Linux-based server. And like Ansible, it is free. It has a free version, just like Ansible. There is an enterprise version where you get more features, but the free version gives you control of 10 puppets, so you can, get familiar with your puppets. If you want more than that, if you really want to take that a little far, then yeah, you'll need the enterprise edition. And on this Linux-based server, we will set up our config for this Nexus device. We'll craft it. I'll show you what it looks like here in a second. It's not YAML, it's their own declarative language. They actually call it the official name is a DSL, declarative structure language. It's just their own way to describe what you're going to be doing to this switch. Sounds weird. And Ansible had their own version of it. It was just in a YAML format. Here it's not YAML, it's just its own version of how you declare your syntax. And this document here, this file, this is the manifest. We'll call it dc.pp. .pp is what you'll see as the manifest file. And very similar to the playbook in Ansible, it's a set of instructions that we're going to have executed on our device. But it is different. And I declare, I had to do it, just popped into my head. It's declarative, whereas Ansible was imperative. So Ansible is more like, hey, here, change your host name, here's some OSPF config, here, change your interface stuff. Puppet is more like, here is how I want you to be. Be this. Here's the state I want you to be in. This is your configuration, Mr. Nexus device. Become it. And I keep saying here is really going to be in reverse. So once we set up our agent on the Nexus device, he will check in with the manifest saying, hey, am I good? Puppet Master, is my configuration okay? And if there are any changes, he'll pull them right down. Otherwise, he's good. By default, he'll check in every 30 minutes. Of course, that's a thing you can change. Now, I do want to show you what the manifest will kind of look like for network configurations, but I want to give you some more insight on how it's kind of organized. So at the top level, kind of getting back to the hierarchical look of things, you have a module, which is how you can have a bunch of manifests organized. And then we could use something called classes to organize the manifest file. And then we have resources, which are similar to tasks in Ansible. They just list what's going to happen, how a change is going to occur on the Nexus device. For example, you, Mr. Nexus, will run OSPF. It will be OSPF process 1, and it will be whatever. So let's take a look at one real quick. Here I am back at Cisco DevNet, developer.cisco.com. As you go down this path, you'll be here on this site a lot more, trust me. And a really cool thing they just released this year is something called Code Exchange, which is a place where people who, like you and I, are messing with network programmability, you can exchange code for different things like Python, Ansible, Puppet, Chef. People have gone before you and already done some of the things you want to do. Great place to check in and say, oh, well, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel here. They've already done it. So I can go in here and type in Puppet. Let me find something here. I'll just click on the first one here. And I'm going to scroll down to the bottom to get some example manifests. Yeah, right here. Boom. Take me there. So here we have an example of a OSPF configuration in the manifest. And we can see some default metric information and auto cost. And then we see area cost and the interface that we're adding to OSPF. So you can kind of read it, understand it. It's human readable. And if you were to dive into Puppet and become a Puppet master, you would start with this. And even going down here, we can see we have a resource type catalog. This looks very familiar to what we kind of saw in Ansible, right? Like the Ansible modules where you can interface with the banner and Cisco command config and all those things. Pretty similar. Now that example I just went over earlier where I had the Nexus device, kind of check in with the manifest and say, hey, how am I doing? And he's checking in. That is a feature that makes it killer compared to Ansible, because with Ansible, there really isn't a way to check configuration consistency, making sure it's okay. I mean, you can manually run a playbook that'll check one version of your configuration versus a previous or the golden version, and you can have that check and give you a result. But this is like legit, like real configuration management, checking every 30 minutes or maybe more to make sure your configuration is consistent, and then applying the proper configuration, the golden image that you have set on your manifest. So Puppet, a great solution for Nexus devices because you need an agent, and only Nexus can have an agent installed on it. But there is, wink wink, some agentless options. This is making me... But it's primarily built to have agents run on it, which is why it's a fan favorite of sysadmins. And if you should proceed with Puppet, you're going to have a Puppet master where you will have it installed on a Linux server, and you'll just establish your manifest. This is how I want you to be, Mr. Nexus device, and then your Nexus device will pull the configuration down and make sure his configuration is exactly what you want it to be. I can't do that anymore. Puppet is definitely a more mature platform. It's older than Ansible, has more features, but Ansible definitely gives us more options for network automation. In the next nugget, we'll take a look at our third and final option for configuration management, Chef. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.